Today it is raining. It's one of those days that just feels like rain. You know what I mean? The sky is dark and the wind is howling outside. So today is a perfect day to curl up with a good book or movie. Maybe that's what you should do. Maybe you're watching this right now while it's pouring cats and dogs outside. Today I want to tell you a story about a rainy day. Not a sad story, no, not at all, but a cute story about an unusual pet and a girl who loved him very much. Let's get started. The girl was called Alice, and she lived in a little house in the suburbs. Her parents were gone most of the time for work, and she spent most of her days alone. She liked it that way. She enjoyed being alone and having her own time. She could play games, read books, and watch movies whenever she wanted. But sometimes she got bored, and when that happened, she would go out into the garden to look for adventure. One day she found a bird that had fallen out of its nest. It was just a tiny little thing, all wet and cold. Alice took it in, dried it up, and fed it some milk. After that, the bird stayed with her and became her friend. They played together every day. Alice named the bird Twinkle because its feathers sparkled in the sun just like a diamond. Time passed and Twinkle grew bigger. Soon he was too big for their cage, but instead of flying away, he stayed with Alice. He slept in her bed and they watched TV together. Of course, this wasn't normal. Birds don't usually stay with humans. But then again, Twinkle wasn't a normal bird either. He was a magical bird. He could talk to Alice and understand her. Sometimes he even told her stories about his adventures in the forest. Twinkle loved nature and he missed his life there, so sometimes he went back to the woods and stayed there for a few days. When he came back to Alice, he always brought her a shiny feather as a gift. With these feathers, Alice made herself beautiful wings so she could fly with Twinkle to the forest. Of course, these were just make-believe games. In reality, Alice couldn't fly. But she didn't mind. She had a lot of fun with Twinkle. One day, Twinkle didn't come back home after his trip to the woods. Alice was worried. She went to the forest to look for him, but she couldn't find him anywhere. She called his name, but only the wind answered her. When the sun began to set, she had to go home. Alone. All the way back home, Alice kept thinking about Twinkle. Where could he be? Had something happened to him? When the next morning came, the rain began. Big raindrops fell from the sky, and Alice felt terrible. She was scared that Twinkle was hurt somewhere, all alone and helpless. She wanted to help him, but she didn't know where to start looking. Then she had an idea. She took one of Twinkle's feathers and went out into the rain. Maybe this would lead her to Twinkle. She walked through the woods until she saw a clearing. In the middle of the clearing stood an old tree, and under this tree sat a small, wet creature. It was Twinkle. He was shivering in the rain, and his wing was hurt. It must have been that fall. That's why he hadn't come back home. Of course, Alice rushed to Twinkle. She hugged him and dried him up with her jacket. Then she put him in her bag and carried him home. At home, Alice took care of Twinkle's wound. She loved him so much, and she was so happy that he was home again. She gave him water and food, and then she wrapped him in a blanket and put him to sleep. When Twinkle woke up, he saw how good Alice was taking care of him. He felt so grateful to have such a kind and loving friend. He nuzzled her hand and looked at her with his beautiful eyes. It was the best medicine for her. She felt better just by looking at him. Twinkle stayed in bed with Alice for many days. During that time, Alice learned something very important. She learned that love is the most powerful magic in the world. Love can heal wounds, mend broken hearts, and make dreams come true. And now, my little friends, I'll tell you something. This isn't just a fairy tale. No, this is real life. There are magical creatures all around us, and all we need to do is open our hearts to them. Be kind to animals, and they will become your friends. Love them, and they will love you back. One day, the sun finally peeked through the clouds and shone into Alice's room. It was time for Twinkle to go back home. Of course, Alice was sad, but she knew it was for the best. She gave Twinkle some bread and nuts and watched him fly away. He soared high above the trees, and his wings sparkled in the sunlight. Alice waved goodbye to him and smiled. She knew that their friendship would last forever. From that day on, Alice continued to live in her little house. She spent her days reading books and playing with her cat, but she never forgot her friend Twinkle. Sometimes she would go to the forest to visit him, and every time he gave her a shiny feather as a gift. With these feathers she made herself beautiful wings and dreamed of faraway lands. She dreamed of a place where a girl and her magical bird could be friends forever. And you know what, my little friends, sometimes dreams do come true. If you believe in them hard enough, anything is possible. Once upon a time, there was a girl who loved animals. Every day she went to the forest near her home to feed the birds. One day she found a small bird that had fallen out of its nest. It was just a tiny little thing, all wet and cold. The girl took it in, dried it up and fed it some milk. Then she put it in a basket and took it home. At first, the bird stayed in the basket and cried, but the girl didn't mind. She spent hours just sitting next to the basket and singing to the bird. She wanted to make it feel better. Day by day, the bird grew stronger. It started to eat on its own, and soon it was able to fly. The girl was so happy that it had recovered. Every day she went to the forest to feed the birds, and the little bird always came to see her. The girl loved the bird so much, and she named it Freedom. One day the girl was walking in the forest and she heard some strange sounds. She followed the sounds and found a group of animals. They were all gathered around a tree and looked very worried. The girl asked them what had happened, and they told her that one of their babies was stuck up in the tree. It was too afraid to come down. The girl looked up and saw a small squirrel. It was just a baby and looked very scared. The girl wanted to help, but she didn't know what to do. Then she had an idea. She asked the other animals if they could help her, and soon they all agreed. The animals started to talk to the baby squirrel and make soothing sounds. They told it that everything was going to be all right and that they would help it come down. The squirrel listened to the animals and slowly started to come down the tree. The girl reached out her hand and the squirrel jumped into her arms. It was so tiny and light, and the girl felt very happy to have helped. From that day on, the animals loved the girl even more. They knew that she was a kind and caring person and would always be there to help them. And the little bird, Freedom, became her best friend. Every day it flew to her window and sang her beautiful songs. The girl loved listening to the bird and dreamed of a day when she could also fly and explore the world like Freedom. And that's the end of our story. Do you like this story? Tell me in the comments below, and if you've been enjoying my videos, please don't forget to subscribe. Goodbye. Rain pounded the porch roof, a steady beat that could be soothing if you weren't getting soaked. You huddle deeper into your jacket, dodging those big raindrops. It's one of those summer storms that drenches everything before vanishing in a flash. But honestly, you love it. The smell of petrichor after the rain. Amazing. Watching birds scramble for cover. So cute. The cool water running down your arms feels refreshing, and the air is just ... crisp. Best part. Everyone else is grumbling about it while you're soaking it all in. You know, there's something special about a rainy day that makes it perfect for reading, for drinking tea, for writing stories. There's nothing more delightful than a good book and a cup of hot tea on a cold, rainy afternoon. So here you are, huddled on the porch swing, enjoying every second of it. You let out a satisfied sigh and take another sip of your tea. This is the life. The only thing that would make it better is if someone joined you here. Then you could read aloud to each other, taking turns sipping the same cup of tea between chapters. And then you could talk about the story, about the characters, about the plot. But unfortunately, no one else seems to share your enthusiasm for this weather. Your family is probably hiding under their blankets right now, cowering from the mere hint of thunder. You almost feel bad for them until you remember they left you on the porch on purpose. Well, maybe not on purpose, but they did leave you here with a smile and a wave and a kiss on the cheek. The rain was falling in thick sheets outside, the kind of rain that drummed a steady beat on the windows, creating a lullaby for anyone who had the good fortune to be inside during its performance. It was one of those days where the sky wept so hard it blotted out the sun, turning the world into a grey monochrome. And yet there was beauty in this monochrome, a starkness that made every drop, every leaf, every blade of grass glisten like silver. It was a sight to behold. Inside a small cottage nestled amidst a sprawling garden, sat an old woman by the window, her wrinkled face as still and as grey as the weather outside. Her name was Alara, and she lived alone in that cottage, or so everyone thought. The truth was, she wasn't alone. She had a companion, a silent, furry companion who shared her life, her food, her solitude, and most importantly, her stories. His name was Grimalkin, and he was a cat. An ordinary cat, except for his fur, which was the color of midnight, and his eyes, which shone like twin embers in the dark. Now, most folks in the village next door would have called him a monster, a beast, anything but a cat. They wouldn't have dared to let him near their children, let alone into their homes. But Alara didn't care what they thought. She saw past his unusual coloring to the gentle soul within. Their days were simple, predictable, and filled with a comfortable silence. In the mornings, Alara would rise with the